Okay. So thanks for coming to what I'm calling the personal Pesach Seder. As I explained in the email, but I'll explain again, my brother-in-law is a psychologist, and he started a little over a year ago this initiative called Personal Parsha, where he will take a, an aspect of the Parsha, give a small Devar Torah about it, but then give a really thoughtful question. Not even a Torah question as much as a life question, something that you can think about for yourself and reflect back upon yourself, just inspired and triggered by whatever's happening in the Parsha. So I was looking at the Seder, thinking about what to prepare for tonight. And I'm like, the Seder is perfect for self-reflection. And the more I was studying it and the more I was reading it, the more I realized it's really amazing. So what I'm doing, and we said today was going to be like 10 ideas on the Seder. What I'm doing really is breaking up the Seder into mini Devar Torahs that lead into a reflective question. So I'm happy to email anyone the reflective questions afterwards, and you can bring it to your own Seder. Also, I always found sometimes that Seders tend to be everyone's kind of like sharing a Devar Torah, but if you can make it into a conversation, that's, I think, an even greater level of really getting into it. So these questions, what I call the personal Seder questions, are hopefully going to be more discussion oriented Seder. So I want to start off with putting the whole Seder into perspective. What is the Seder, and how do we think of it in regards to the whole year? So the Torah actually calls Nisan.
Yeah, this point.
Hold on a second. Okay, I'm gonna mute everyone, but you have the option to unmute, because if you have an idea, if you want to chime in, please do it. That is in the and okay, allow participants. Okay, you are allowed to unmute yourself, so please do if you want to chime in. So, well, now that I unmuted you, I was about to ask a question. The beginning of the year. When is the beginning of the Jewish year? Rosh Hashanah, right? That is the beginning of that is our new year. But that's not what the Torah says. When the Torah is explaining the month of Nisan, it says the beginning of the month, the first of the month. So why is that? And that's where Chazal come in the Gemara, and they say that Tishrei is the beginning of the year, but Nisan is the beginning of the months. Now, if you break that down even if you just took a step back, you realize the Tishrei is following the natural cycle of the world. It's going to follow an agricultural cycle. It's going to follow the seasons. There is a natural year already made. It's not necessarily months. We arbitrarily kind of break up months. There could be 4 months in one year. We decided there's 12. So Tishrei is the beginning of the natural world, and Nisan is the cycle of human experience. And that the years and the months and the holidays that we are doing are Stephen is saying, isn't it based on lunar cycles? The months are based on lunar cycles, yes, but the holidays, yes, you're right, Stephen. It's just I'm trying to like break it down into like a smaller idea. But the holidays, going back to Rosh Chodesh, and when we decide when the holiday is based on the moon, but that's because of what the Eidim, the witnesses, are deciding when they are. So it's all very human based, even though it is based on the lunar calendar, to the different lunar calendars. What are the holidays? The holidays, and this is a beautiful idea from Rav Ezra Bick. Rav Ezra Bick says that the holidays are not summits. It's kind of like if you have a summit of the year and you're kind of going, and then you have a holiday and that's your summit, you're going down. You're like, no. The holidays aren't the summits. The holidays are actually stations. That Nisan is the start of your personal relationship with God. And every holiday is our time to check back in with God and say, okay, where are we at? How are we feeling? How's our relationship going? It's a station stop where we take stock in what our lives have and what our relationship is like with God. And then we continue, hopefully, in a more elevated space from that holiday and on. So therefore, Pesach is the beginning of your relationship with God, of your new year with God, which means the Seder experience is actually like the countdown, the 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5 countdown of the new year. which means the Seder experience is starting off with your relationship with God. So the first personal Seder question I'm going to pose is, and this is what you can ask in the Seder, when do you feel closest to Hashem? And the New Year's resolution would be, what area that you feel closest to Hashem do you want to grow in, or where do you feel least closest that you might want to grow to God? And that can be an amazing conversation where I can tell you from a personal experience, I think it was, I was studying in Israel for the year, and I sat with a teacher and I said, like, I am not such a davener. Like, I kind of find myself davening quickly so that I can learn more Torah or prepare for classes more. And so she looks at me and she says, so that just means you connect to God through Torah and not necessarily through davening as much. So on the one hand, I so appreciated that because I realized it wasn't necessarily a fault in me. Also, this is like a very 18-year-old year in Israel moment, but I still liked the moment that it was a reflective moment for me where I realized the relationship with God for me is through learning Torah. I can always work on my tefillah. That's a really important thing to do, but that's okay. That naturally, that's my own. So that's the first question: is when do you feel closest to God? And your New Year's resolution would be, how are you going to develop your relationship with Hashem, either to strengthen that closest area or to strengthen the weakest area? We're going to start moving through the Seder. So you said he posed it. So I want to also suggest that we do actually unmute for one of the questions. Maybe at the end, if we have time, if everyone wants to think about, if it's not too personal, if it's too personal, that's absolutely fine. You do not have to share, but maybe that's the question. If we want to come to at the end, we can think about it and share at the end. So starting off with halach ma'anya. So in the original Beit HaMikdash temple Seder, we were commanded to invite others to eat of the Pesach karban so that there would be absolutely no karban left at the end. They basically, I once went to, and it's no longer around because that's what happens to New York City restaurants, but I went to a New York City restaurant where the placemat was a very fancy steakhouse, and they had these placemats with a cow on it, and the cow was divided up by the sections. So when you ordered your steak, you could know what section it was from. But that's what I think about when I think of the Pesach offering, this lamb, that they actually designated different parts of the lamb before the Seder so that the entire thing would be eaten by the end of the Seder. Halacha could have said everyone should have at least 2 families per Seder. The halacha didn't say that. The halacha said the karban Pesach has to be finished by the end of the night, which means that the halacha was actually mandating a voluntary generosity. And it was giving a value of what's the lesson, what lies at the base of being gluttony. Generous. Or, well, no, it's not, because that's actually the opposite. Stephen, that's a good point, because it's teaching the lesson of what lies at the base of generosity. I have too much for myself. And you have to think, it says, if I were to take a whole lamb, I'm for sure going to have leftover, or in Stephen's case, he's just going to eat the whole thing. We don't want to do that. So I may as well share it with others. Sharing out of pity, doing chesed out of pity, it can be supercilious. It can cause someone to feel a sense of superiority. And that's not what we want when we're trying to be generous and we're trying to do chesed, when we're trying to be there for others. It's about just being there for someone. It's about just giving to someone because I have too much. I may as well share, which also means that everyone's approaching the Seder as equals. It's not that some people are better than others or higher than others or more aristocratic than others. We all lean, we all dine at the Seder table, but we're all there as equals. And so by mandating that generosity, it's teaching that basic life lesson of I have too much, how do I share? Obviously, also a part of the Pesach story, a slave can never be generous because they don't own anything. They have nothing to give in that way. So the Seder is the ultimate opposite experience of that. So my personal Seder question here is about chesed. have you ever wished someone had treated you with chesed when they haven't? And what did that feel like? And what do you think held that person back? That's a very, very personal question. So I would say the flip side of it would be, what are the kinds of things that get in the way of chesed? What are the kinds of things that get in the way of someone doing a chesed and being generous and being able to give to others? So that is halach ma'anya. Ma nishtana, I actually started preparing something, and then I found, and again, I will include this in an email to whoever would like, the Yeshiva University Sachs Herenstein Center. I don't know, did everyone see this yet? They created an insert for the Haggadah this year. They call it the Haggadah of Hope. I should warn you, it's very intense because it's meant to bring the post-October 7th world into the Seder. But I really appreciated the way that they did phrase some of the things. So one of the things they said was during the Manishtana to ask, why is this year different than all other years? On all other years, we celebrate our redemption from Egypt. This year, we also pray for Israel's redemption from the hands of terrorists and the forces of hate. May each hostage be freed from bondage, and may the plague of Jew hatred be eliminated once and for all on this very night. What question is most on your mind on this Seder night? That would be my personal Seder question for Manishtana. Also, oops, I did not open the chat, so I apologize if I missed any comments. Okay, I have the chat now open. And I'll bring back the YU insert in a little bit. The Sipor Yetziat Mitzrayim, now we're getting into Magid. So there are two aspects of Magid, of the story, the retelling of the Yetziat Mitzrayim story. And there's actually two separate components of it. One is retelling it. There's a commandment to just tell the story. There's also a commandment to reenact the story. It's very physical. Seder has all of the different props. Any Sfardim on the call with like the whacking? They whack with something. I don't remember what
my
it is.
sister-in-law is Farsi, and we do that at the Seder.
Oh, there you go. Do you do the questions in Farsi? I used to actually know them.
No.
I don't know why.
No.
We used to actually do the Manishana in Farsi. I could not tell you why, but my brother loved languages, so he always brought that. So the retelling of Sipor Yetziat Mitzrayim. So we actually have an instruction on how to tell the story, which is Matzchil begenut u'mesayim be'shavach. We start at a very low point and we end with praise. So we're trying to bring us through that journey and through that arc of starting in the slavery and ending with praise. So what's the very famous thing that's part of the Sipor? You're specifically meant to tell the children. You're meant to tell the next generation. And Rav, I think this also might be Rav Bick, I read it there as well, that Rav Bick said, telling your children is not just about you're telling the next generation, you're getting the children involved. It's actually a lesson in the fact that we're actually not telling a story. We're telling a personal memory. That this is the, when we tell our children Yetziat Mitzrayim, it's like saying, kids, listen up. This is what happened to me when I was a little child. And I wanted you to know about that story. And so that's actually what we're doing when we're telling our children Sipor Yetziat Mitzrayim. This is our story. This is our collective memory. I certainly feel like this Pesach, in the post-October 7th world, there's so much more of that collective and communal feeling that we're all really in this together. And it started 3,000 years ago. So the personal Seder question, on one hand, for Sipor Yetziat Mitzrayim, I've got two parts to this. So for the retelling aspect would be, what is a memory from your childhood of Pesach that you want to share with your family? And if you have children, with your children. What is something that you want to pass on personally about that Pesach Seder, about your own Pesach Seder, but in the greater context of we're telling the children our collective family personal memories. The second part that I talked about with Sipor Yetziat Mitzrayim is reenacting. It's getting physically into it. And that is under the instruction of Kachol Dor Vador, Chayav Adam Lerot Et Atzmo Ki'ilu Hu Yetzam Mitzrayim. Every generation needs to see themselves as if they themselves left Egypt. So that's why we have matzah, the lechem oni, which is the bread of affliction. That's what the Jews, they weren't able, that's what they either ate as very poor slaves, or when they were running out of Egypt, that's what they the bread wasn't able to rise. We eat the bitter maror. We dip food in salt water. We recline to show what a free man would look like. And we drink wine to show what a free person would look like. We're acting it out. Interestingly, the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah repeats that same phrase of Chayav Adam Lerot Et Atzmo Ki'ilu Hu Yetzam Mitzrayim with two changes. He says Chayav Adam Leharot, which means to show. We said lirot, to see. He says laharot, to show themselves. Ki'ilu hu ba'atzmo, as if they themselves, yatsa ata, went now, mishiabud Mitzrayim. So he does two things. One of them is laharot, to show. So he really gets into, you really have to physically reenact this. You really have to try to get into that mindset. And you also have to think about it as if it's happening ata, right now. So here the Rambam is basically saying halacha is sending the Jew back into slavery every year to really experience it. And to me, the personal Seder question popped out. What do you think were the emotions that the Jews were feeling when they left Egypt? That was a very complicated leaving. They didn't know anything. It's not like they themselves had freedom and then were enslaved. They were born into slavery. They were part of slavery for hundreds of years. And they went through the plagues and now they're free. What were they feeling the night that they brought the Pesach sacrifice? What are the emotions that they can possibly feel to really get into that mindset? And the follow-up to be, did you ever feel those feelings in your life? And when was it? This question would definitely take some time to think about, but could be really helpful in guiding us to getting to a place where we could feel what our ancestors were feeling 3,000 years ago. And if there was a time in your life when you might have felt those feelings, then you're really getting into Laharot, showing Mishiabud Legula.
Can I share?
Go for it. We have time. We have time. Go for it.
It's just making me think of the beginning of COVID, where lahavdil, but having all of that structure in your life. Not that going to work every day is slavery, but all of a sudden you're home. And I was unable to do any work from home. So I was just sent home. Thank God I was paid while I couldn't do any work. But that feeling of it was freedom, but I didn't know what, there was no structure. And I think one of the brilliant things that Hashem did is he built that scaffolding on the freedom, of structure for Bnei Israel, so that a slave who is freed doesn't know what to do with their freedom, so they have to have that structure imposed on them.
That's so interesting. First of all, so this is what I love about these kinds of questions, because as soon as you said COVID, my mind and honestly, my emotions, I can feel it in my body, went to such a different place. Because for you, it almost meant this freedom, but oh my gosh, what do I do with this? For me, I had two little kids. My husband was very busy. And so, but that's where I think this is so good. It's such a wonderful exercise of being okay, so what are the emotions that brought out? But I do relate to that, where I had to say, I have the entire day, I had to figure out a structure for me and my kids to give us our sanity. And again, from Hashem, it was Shabbat that would break it up. If you were not Shomer Shabbat, or you're not keeping, if you're not Jewish, you're not keeping Shabbos, whatever it is, every day was endless. So just having Shabbat, and even though we didn't have shul, it gave us a structure. It gave us something. Oh, see, this is why if I
I mean,
had 2
I
hours
can
for this class, I
imagine,
would have opened each question up.
I can imagine, it looks like there are plenty of retirees in the room. I imagine that it's probably a similar situation when you retire. You know, I don't know.
Does it feel like a freedom or not? So this is where I think these questions can really
It's
help.
total.
Yeah.
Actually, we loved COVID, even though it was scary to go out, because we, when you're busy, your life, you're going this way, you're going that way. We were together the whole time, and we loved it.
Yeah.
We took walks together. We actually talked. We had the time to do that because he's always on his computer. I'm always doing my. But we actually enjoyed it. The only part was scary was going out shopping.
Sure.
But we loved it.
So that was I remember having that conversation with a lot of people of depending kind of where you are in life. It was either really, really difficult or in some way that was really lovely. I remember for sure having that. And it's cannot so frame, like it's a good jealousy. I'm happy you had that, even if I didn't. So that's a Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. The Arba Banim, the 4 sons. So I mean, these questions I have a myriad of ideas of personal Seder questions. So I didn't even have the Dvar Torah because I just like kept writing different ideas of what a personal Seder question could be. So one question, which I guess this is more of the Torah question, is why is it called the 4 sons and not the 4 people? Here are 4 personality types. Why does it? Why? So that can have, to me, that has 2 directions. One of them is, what is it about a parent-child relationship that is related to different types of children? This is why they're called the 4 sons. The other aspect of, maybe it's because it's 4 sons in one family. So what's it like to have 4 different types of people and how they relate to God or how they relate to Torah in one family?
Isn't it just much more simple than that? That like the shot of the actual text of the Torah says, "And you shall tell your son on that day."
No.
And that's where we get each of the like it says that 4
But
times.
the Haggadah has so much. Yes, the language from the psukim from the Torah, but the Haggadah, all the time in like liturgy, we say, your children, we should tell your children, but we're not necessarily drawing on the family structure. The Haggadah looked at it and said, oh, look, this must be 4 sons, as opposed to saying, this is what you tell your children. I think the simple answer for sure, Stephen, but I think there might be something more here, which is both about the parent-child relationship, but also could be just a family dynamic. In which case, there's so many questions we can bring to the Seder. One of them would just be reflecting on your own relationship with your parents, and how it has affected you. Another one is about your relationship to your own children and how you think about your children and their personality types. A lot of conversations I have with younger parents is learning to see your children as not an extension of yourself, that they are their own human beings, because when they're little, it's hard, it's easier to see that framework. And I also definitely heed the advice of people who have been through this before and people with older children. But certainly on the other side of the 4 sons is just looking at each of the 4 types of people in this section of the Haggadah and saying, which one do you relate to? Or was there a point in your life when you really related to one of the sons, one of the answers, and when was that in your life? Again, that one I think can be very personal, but if it's a family Seder, maybe people will be more comfortable and open and willing, and definitely a little bit more vulnerable, because it could be someone's looking at the text and they're saying, there was a point in my life when I was silent. I did not have anything to say. I did not have any questions. Or someone who could feel like they needed to reject Hashem. They felt angry. A high emotional point. I remember Yeah, I was to share my own. Just look what popped into my mind. I remember I was surprised by my own reaction when I went to Poland and did the tour of the concentration camps, and I wasn't sad as much as angry, and it really surprised me. And that was like my own reflection. So that's when I was reading through The Wicked Son, and he's kind of wants to reject God. I remember thinking like that felt familiar that week that I was in the week I was in Poland and went to Majdanek in this camp that could be brought up so quickly, which is wild. But again, that can get very personal and very vulnerable. Moving on to a little bit more of a lighter one is Arami Oved Avi. When we start going through the Yetziat Mitzrayim story, we actually very interestingly go to a point in the Torah that is not what we would think. Usually you would think you would go to Shmot. That's the full telling of the 10 plagues and Moshe bringing us out and all of the details in the drama. But that's not what the Haggadah uses. The Haggadah uses the section from Dvarim, which is what the point where we bring the Bikurim, the first fruits, and we retell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim when we brought the first fruits in the Beit HaMikdash, and that's the section that the Haggadah uses. So, why is it? So the easy answer, the practical answer is it's shorter. We would all be at our Seders till 4 a.m. if we went to the Shmot one. We have to do it short. We got to do concise. Rav Rimon in Israel, from the Gush, he's the chief rabbi of Gush Etzion, he had a beautiful idea, and he said, the story of Shmot, while it's wonderful in its own right, starts from the story of Shmot. It starts from Moshe, and it starts from that aspect. Arami Oved Avi, the story of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim with Arami Oved Avi, starts with the forefathers. That the story of the Jewish people starts at the very beginning and goes all the way to Yetziat Mitzrayim and all the way to you sitting at the Seder table. So it actually kind of connects to the first part that we had talked about with, I think it was the Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim reenacting. No, it was retelling, I'm sorry. That this is not a story we're telling, it's our story we're telling. It's our memory we're telling. It starts all the way from Avram Avinu, goes through Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, and to us today. And that's why it shows that section of Dvarim. So an idea that I heard that I absolutely love is if you know everyone coming to your Seder, you're not having any surprise guests, print out a world map and have sticky notes, and everyone can put on the world map where their family is from so that everyone could share their family story. Now, obviously, if we all go back, we can all be from the same place, which makes us one big family. But your more recent stories of, Poland or Syria or wherever you might be, and what is your family story? Because that is truly the continuation of Arami Oved Avi. We are the great-grandchildren of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and our stories is part of the greater story that we're telling here at the Seder. The next section that I want to talk about is miracles, which, hold on one second, I pulled up some psukim that I wanted to read. And of course, I have way too many tabs open. Okay, here it is. Here we go. A essay that I love reading and always can almost come back to is Kol Dodi Dofek from Rav Soloveitchik. Specifically talking about miracles. I think this is in preparing for this class is the first time I read it post October 7th. So I'll read to it for me for a second, but just so you understand where it's coming from. Kol Dodi Dofek, I hear the voice of my beloved knocks, is a refrain from Shir HaShirim, from Song of Songs. And that's what the essay is titled. Because I want to read you the 5 psukim from Shir HaShirim that this comes from. So this is actually from the 5th parak in the Song of Songs. What's happening from chapters 1 through 4? So there's basically a maiden from the fields. She's, from the vineyard families. She's not aristocrat, she's not royal, and she's not wealthy. And she is just absolutely in love with the dode, with the male in the story. The male, when he refers to the woman, it's a lot of more riches and expensive things. So he talks about oils and he talks about, beautiful drapes. He's giving different metaphors from a very wealthy background. So he seems to be an aristocrat. And when she says to him, I think you're very handsome, it's all very earthy and very farm-like metaphors, which means she's probably someone in the village. So it's this kind of village girl who's in love with this aristocratic man. And they have this kind of Harry met Sally relationship throughout Song of Songs, because it's always kind of like when she's ready to date him, he's not really available. And when he's ready to date, she's not really available. And it goes back and forth throughout the chapters. And we get to read it this year because we have a Shabbat Chol HaMoed. But at some point, finally, the Dode, the man, comes to the woman's house. And, oh, 1 second, I'm just scrolling. Okay. He approaches her and she says, Ani yeshena, I'm sleeping, v'libi air, but my heart is awakened. Kol dodi dofek, I hear the voice of my beloved knocking. And he says, Achoti, my sister Ra'ayat, that's not creepy back then. Achoti, my sister Ra'ayati, my friend Yonati, my soulmate, Timati, my match, Sheroshi nimlat tal. He's climbed the lattice, he's hanging onto the window, and he says, my hair is full of dew. He's waiting outside for her, and he's getting cold, Lila, in the middle of the night. So they're having this Harry met Sally relationship, and he's doing this beautiful romantic gesture of climbing the lattice and waiting outside her window. So you would expect her to run and open the window and be there for him. And what does she say? Patashti et gertunati. I already took off my night robe. How am I going to get dressed? V'rachatzti et ragli. I already washed my feet. What? I'm going to get them dirty? So you're wondering what is going on. She's coming up with the most flimsy of excuses here. The next pasuk, it takes your breath away. It says, Dodi shalach yado min hachor. My beloved took his hand away from the handle, from the door. Ume'ai hamu alav, and my heart stirred for him. So this woman's clearly having a lot of commitment issues. She got really, really nervous when he finally approached. And then his hand goes away and she says, what am I doing? This is, I'm making a mistake. He's right here for me. So kamti ani liftoach l'dodi. I got up to open the door for my beloved. V'yadai not pu more, but my hands, they were full of my oil from her night routine, her skincare routine. The etzbotai ma'or over. My hands were full of oil and were slipping al kapot hanam'ul on the lock. She was trying and fumbling to open the door, and she couldn't open the door to her beloved. Patachti ani lidodi. I opened the door for my beloved. V'dodi chamak avar. But my beloved had already turned away. Those are the 5 psukim that Rav Soloveitchik took the inspiration to say, Kol dodi dofek, the voice of my beloved knocks. And he wrote this absolutely beautiful essay of saying there were 6 knocks. Hashem is knocking on our door, that Medinat Yisrael is here. So I'm just going to read to you from the beginning of his essay, just to put into context for us miracles in the 20th century. 8 years ago, in the midst of a night of terrors of Majdanek, Treblinka, and Buchenwald, in a night of gas chambers and crematoria, in a night of total divine self-concealment, in a night ruled by the devil of doubt and destruction, who sought to sweep the lover from her own tent into the Catholic Church, in a night continuous searching for the beloved. On that very night, the beloved appeared. The Almighty, who was hiding in his splendid sanctum, suddenly appeared and began to beckon at the tent of the lover, who tossed and turned on her bed, beset by convulsions and the agonies of hell. Because of the beating and the knocking at the door of the mournful lover, the state of Israel was born. I do not know who the representatives of the press with their human eyes saw to be the chairman in that fateful session of the General Assembly in which the creation of the state of Israel was decided, meaning he's talking about the UN vote. But he who looked carefully with his spiritual eye saw the true chairman who conducted the proceedings of the beloved. He knocked with his gavel on the lectern. Second, the knock of the beloved was heard on the battlefield. The tiny defense forces of the Israel defeated the mighty Arab enemies. The miracle of the many delivered into the hands of the few materialized before our eyes. This is just an example of him talking about Hashem knocking. Hashem knocked with the UN vote. Hashem knocked with the fact of that Israel defeated in 67, and he goes through 6 knocks that he identified as these incredibly miraculous things that aren't like the plagues. They're not completely against nature, but if we take a step back, we realize Hashem's hand was there. So that, to me, being able to read some of those essays is my context of asking, what miracles have you seen in your life? What miracles or presence of Hashem do you, sometimes it takes hindsight to see it. Sometimes we recognize it in the moment. I think a lot of people have had mixed feelings in the past couple months about asking where Hashem is and seeing God, but there are a lot of really beautiful ways where we see Yad Hashem in helping the Jewish people. And that's definitely a place for conversation. 8:38, just want to make sure. I have a couple more suggestions of personal Seder questions. Dam ve'esh v'timrot ashan. So this one, again, I took from the YU Haggadah insert. They wrote, they didn't get specific authors. I don't know who wrote this. I know Erica Brown runs the center, but I'm sure it's a bunch of people. Blood, fire, and pillars of smoke. Dam ve'esh v'timrot ashan. At the Seder, we remember the scars of war. Oh, it's hard to read. The blood, the fire, and the smoke. We also tend the fire that burns inside for the end of war, and we will not let those fires go out. As we read in the Torah, a perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar. It will not be extinguished. Our extended family in Israel are on the altar right now. They've been making immense sacrifices, and we must be the perpetual fire. The fire will not go out. We will not stop protesting. We will not stop marching. We will not tire of singing, and we will not stop reciting Tehillim. Every evening on the ancient altar, the ashes of the sacrifices were cleared. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch explains that this symbolizes the daily renewal of our hope and our energy. Fresh, he writes, as if nothing had yet been accomplished, does the beginning of every new day call us to go out to our mission with full new devotion and sacrifice. And nothing that has already been done may lessen the energy with which we go on our duty. It matters what we did yesterday, it matters what we do today, and it matters what we will do tomorrow. We will keep the fires lit each and every day until one of those precious souls is home for good. The 2 questions you can ask are either one, they suggest describe a fire that burns within you that will not be extinguished. And the other conversation can be, what can we continue to do for Medinat Yisrael and for the hostages every day? Dayenu, I think, is probably something that everyone does already, but I couldn't not do it because it seems so obvious for a personal Seder question, is what is something that you appreciate? Everyone go around in the Seder and say, what is something that you appreciate in your life or something that you've appreciated this year? If you want to do the more vulnerable risk-taking side, you could say, what is something you've taken for granted? Which is just the other side of the coin, because it means now we can appreciate it. Acknowledging that we once took it for granted, now we can appreciate it. 8:41. Okay, we're gonna end before 9. Just a couple more minutes. Pesach, matzah, umaror. So on the first Seder night, the Jews in Mitzrayim slaughtered a lamb, smeared its blood on the posts to show that this was a Jewish home. The question to ask around the table is twofold. One is, how is your home a Jewish home? How is it obvious that when someone walks into your home that it's a Jewish home? What is it that's your identifying mark? The other question is, for you, what makes your Jewish identity obvious to others? Besides, it could be the way you dress or keep up, but what is it about you that emanates to the world? I am a Jew, and this is my identity. That's Pesach. Matzah. Yeah, Stephen, go for it.
Yeah, it just occurred to me that the demarcation of the Jewish homes in Mitzrayim the use of blood. And
Mm.
when you asked how you personally mark yourself as a Jew, it made me think of Brit Milah. That like, you know,
I thought you were going to say mezuzah.
No. I mean, we always make the
Doorposts.
connection between the blood on the doorposts and mezuzah, but it never occurred to me that there's a blood connection between
To bris
marking
milah.
at least with men, marking ourselves
Yeah.
as being Jewish. You know, blood has to be drawn, and marking the home as Jewish, blood has to. There's something there. I don't know what it is, but
I want to. Okay, I'm going to look at the Sefer Chinuch because I'm almost positive he makes a connection. The Sefer Chinuch says that the Brit Milah it's a sign, and not just for the baby boy, because every time a baby boy has a bris, it's a sign for everyone, to include the women, that it's a remembrance that Hashem didn't make us complete, and our mission is to complete His work. He created us in with incredible capacity, but we have to actually live up to that potential and fulfill that potential. So that's where I'm kind of wondering, with Pesach being this moment of reflection, going back to that first idea of this is the beginning of my relationship with Hashem of the year. This is my new year with Hashem and my renewed relationship with Hashem, and the bris being the starting the covenant between this baby. It's a beautiful idea. I'll look into that though, about the connection. That is my Pesach question. My matzah question. Matzah represents both lechem oni, the bread of our affliction, and the lechem of the geula, because as we were running out, the bread didn't have time to rise. So the fact that this one thing can reflect these two polar opposite ideas, what is something in your life that has brought both its challenges and its gifts? It's often something that we feel very blessed with, that sometimes is also something that gives us the most challenge. So what is it in your life that has that duality and those two characteristics to it? Maror, is there a time when one should feel bitterness in their lives? When and why? Is there a time that you're not supposed to mask your feelings and you're supposed to feel the maror and feel the bitterness? And why is it important to go on that journey? 8:45. So I'm going to end with my last one, which is when we sing at the very end, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. I think it's a beautiful idea for everyone to go around and to say that what is your hope and tefillah for the coming year, for you, for the Jewish people, and for the world. We're singing about the new year, our hope that it's going to be in Yerushalayim, but that's also a moment that we can reflect on, what are we hoping? You know, if we can manifest it, what are we going to put out into the world? What are we hoping happens for our lives, for the Jewish people, and hopefully, if we can have aspiration, for the entire world to achieve. Those are my personal Seder ideas, ways to create the Seder to be hopefully more conversational, more reflective, and more discussion based. And if anyone wants, shoot me an email, and I'm happy to send you some of these questions. I'm gonna just put my email here. Yeah, that's not how you spell Young Israel. West Hartford.
I think so.
Ruthie. It's Ruthie at Young Israel West Hartford, WH.org. So if you just email me, I'll shoot you those questions.
We want it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was
great. Okay, good. Oh, I should stop recording. But thank you. This was such a fun exercise for me. So I appreciate the opportunity to